This is Franchise Today, brought to you by FRM Solutions, providers of the best-in-class software solutions for franchise relationship management. Franchise Today is your destination for weekly information, conversations, and interviews with accomplished industry leaders, all of whom share best practices for sustainable growth and sensible franchising. Here now, your host, Stan Friedman, to kick off this week's podcast.
Today is Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. I'm Stan Friedman, and this is Franchise Today. Well, just like that, IFA has come and gone, and as typically is the case, it was a blur. This year, I intentionally programmed more time to pivot and less structured and committed time at convention, yet it seems that no matter how hard I try to squeeze more out of this annual event, it just takes on a life of its own, and I just keep paddling as fast as I can go. It was truly great having my son Michael back at the booth with me at FRM Solutions, along with my partner Eric Stoll and our ever-so-talented Danny Jackson, Director of Implementation. Many great conversations were had with old friends and new to carry us into the fast pace of 2025 and the years ahead. Switching gears, I want to once again thank Peach Cobbler Factory franchise founder and CEO Greg George for sharing so much of his family's trials, tribulations, and franchise successes with us over the course of the last couple of weeks, and hope that at least someone, if not more, in this audience was moved by his sincere desire to reach out and help someone that may still be wrestling with some of the demons that he's been able to overcome. Today, I introduce you to yet another high-achieving overcomer. John Rotche was a highly recruited middle linebacker in his high school days, destined for greatness on the college gridiron and probably in the NFL thereafter. But all of that changed dramatically when John took a serious hit during the very last game of his high school career, and so ended his football aspirations. A lesser person might have been crushed by this tragedy and allow it to redefine his life to one of torment or worse. But that's not the fabric from which John Rotche is cut. Stick around, because you're about to hear from a franchise professional that will move you and inspire you to build teams and to be all that you can be. Franworth founder and CEO John Rotche, right here when I return in 2 minutes or less. Don't go away.
Franchise Today will be right back, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Franchise Today is brought to you by Profit Keeper, the #1 franchise analytics platform for franchisors and franchisees. Trusted by more than 150 brands and 50,000 franchisees, Profit Keeper connects KPI, benchmark, and royalty data from your locations, groups, and territories. With Profit Keeper, you see stats in real time, presented simply and graphically. This makes it easy to identify actionable information for franchisees to help them drive profitability and brand growth at the unit level. No more wrangling data and guessing what works and what doesn't. To learn more and to get started, visit profitkeeper.com/franchise today. Franworth was created to build, incubate, and grow emerging franchise brands, with mentorship always at the forefront. Franworth founder and CVO John Rotche was fortunate enough to have the guidance and support of some of the most renowned mentors in their games, who contributed to the shaping of his philosophy of paying it forward. Under the influence of such icons as University of Michigan legendary football coach Bo Schembechler, and franchising greats, the likes of Domino Pizza founder and CEO Tom Monahan, and Service Brands International founder, serial entrepreneur, and IFA icon David McKinnon, John has gone on to influence the lives of many individuals, their emerging brands, and the families that they serve and employ. He's here today to tell us all about it. So with no further ado, John Rotche. Welcome to Franchise Today.
Thank you, Stan. Good to be with you. Longtime friend. So it's great to hear your voice.
I've enjoyed getting to know you over the years, John, across brands. I actually had to think back about one of the first meetings I had with you, and we'll talk about some of this as we unpack everything here today. But I remember sitting with you at Ducks and Hoods, and You telling me a story about people on Discovery Day and how you used to despair when you saw people sitting in the waiting room coming for Discovery Day, and you wish that they were coming because they really were on a path to wanting a franchise instead of having to replace an income or something like that. Do you remember telling me that?
I do. Yeah. In fact, I can place right where we were sitting. We were in the Belfort franchise group in the cafe area. And I'm still really passionate about that today. And that's what I love about your podcast is we know that 9 out of 10 people come to buy a franchise, sadly, but more often than not, they're there because they have to be, not necessarily because they want to be, or it's been a lifelong dream or passion, which is why it's so important for franchisors to be really responsible in what we do and honor the situation where these guests are coming in to look to buy one of our businesses. And it's really a privilege to be able to help them in this next kind of season of their life.
Well, that makes a great segue for what we do every week at the beginning of the podcast, John. We talk about how it's not just the candidates, but it's the franchisors too, who unintentionally sometimes found their way to franchising. More likely, franchising found you. So why don't you wind the tape back for us? Let's talk about the career path that you were on all the way back in high school and how that led from what you thought was going to be a life on the gridiron to a life in franchising.
Yeah, well, happy to. So I guess by way of background, I'm the youngest of 7 kids. I'm from Chicago, and my father went to Michigan. None of my siblings did. And I was like preordained that I was going to go to Michigan, and if everything went according, I was going to be playing football, and things really were going according to at least John's plan. I was pretty heavily recruited, middle linebacker, and I thought everything that I dreamed of my whole life, it was coming true up until one day I took a hit, which ended my career and permanently. Whereas they said, John, you're never going to play football again. And I had the good fortune to have a really caring leader come into my life, mentor, who was actually kind of like a childhood idol of mine, a legendary football coach, Bo Schembechler of Michigan, and Bo offered me an opportunity to be part of the Michigan football program. And even though I couldn't play anymore, and I was just kind of awestruck by his kind of generosity and kindness. And, I went to Michigan and I was part of the football program, never got to play, but we ended up, we won 3 championships in 4 years. And and what I went to school for too, I wanted to be a coach. I was so grateful for what Coach Schembechler did. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to coach. That's what I'll study in school. To your point, franchising was never even a thought. And I ended up, but before I took this interesting kind of pivot, because I went to Michigan and I said, you know what Coach Schembechler did for me, I'm so grateful. And I said, so I'd like to start an internship program to help other kids have the same experience with Michigan football that I had. And Michigan was kind enough to give me that opportunity, but it wasn't something that they were necessarily going to stand up and fund and so forth. But they gave me kind of like a big ball of clay to do what I want with it. And so I started bartending at the local campus bar, and I started saving all my tips and to fund a program that I called Team Blue. And I'll never forget, I bought 12 really kind of sweet sweatsuits, 6 for guys, 6 for girls. And so Team Blue started with 12 people. And I became like their mentor, if you will, and I helped them be part of Michigan football. It was all volunteer, both on their part and mine. And what I ended up, it was 25 years later, Team Blue put over 3,000 kids through the program. It became probably the most successful internship program in Division I sports. And so I always tell people, how many people did Bo Schembechler really help that day he gave me an opportunity? So anyhow, I thought I wanted to be a coach. I took a pivot to start Team Blue, and I ran that for about 3 years. And then I realized I needed to get a real job for me. And so Domino's Pizza was hiring some ex-athletes. and they were doing this accelerated training program of about, I think there were 5 of us. There was probably 4 football guys, 1 basketball player. And we came in, admittedly, we probably had an ego bigger than we deserved because we're Michigan football. We had 3 coming in with 3 championships under our belt. So we thought Mr. Monahan, the founder of Domino's, we thought that he should be so lucky to have us. And that's where our egos were probably at the time. And literally, we thought we were going to come in like executive leadership positions. And nothing could have been further from the truth. My first job was delivering pizzas at store 1101, Tom Monahan's very first Domino's store. And that's how I got into franchising, literally delivering pizzas for Domino's. And I got such a passion for this business of franchising in general because I learned from the ground up. And my career, fortunately, it improved. It went up a little bit. And then I had an opportunity to run the world headquarters store at Domino's Farms, which is a mile-long, sprawling, Frank Lloyd Wright architecture type of building with roaming buffalo outside your windows. And it's just a great, it's a pretty amazing place.
I've had the good fortune of visiting that campus, John. Your description is spot on.
Yeah, well, Tom Monahan, he was a student of Frank Lloyd Wright. And so he modeled everything off of that. And so it was a wonderful place to be. And so I ran the headquarters store. And what's interesting about that is, yes, the hours were better than if I was running one of the Ann Arbor stores. They were open 7 days a week, typically 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. My store was open Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And so while everyone said, gosh, Rotche, how'd you get that deal? We were all making the same salary, but I had a fraction of the open hours during the week. But what people didn't understand, like, who are my customers? My customers were the executives at Domino's Pizza. They were every employee at Domino's Pizza. So, if I made a 14-inch pizza with more than 40 pepperoni or less than 40 pepperoni or the right amount of sauce or right amount of cheese, someone was in my store making me aware of that. And so had I known now, after doing this for 35 years, foundationally, these were these building blocks that I was learning about the importance of consistency, following a standard, and I didn't know that at the time. But my career kind of kept going. I ran a bunch of corporate stores. I became part of the training team, and Mr. Monahan offered me an opportunity, what I actually thought was a demotion, because I had like hundreds of stores at one point, but he asked me to run the 6 Ann Arbor shops. And he could tell, I don't know, physically, maybe I'm not a good poker player, but he said, you don't look very enthused. And I said, gosh, Mr. Monahan, I'm just having a hard time seeing how my career is going in the right direction. I feel like I'm going backwards. And he said, no, you don't understand. These stores are, every store we open across the globe have to be modeled off of Ann Arbor. You ran the test kitchen, now I want you to run these because these need to be our model stores. And Stan, to your point, I'm so grateful to my mentors because we didn't have cell phones at the time. We had pagers, and I'd get paged from Tom Monahan to ask me to come by his house, i.e. a compound, pick him up, and go tour the same 6 stores multiple times throughout the week. Some people might say Tom is kind of a little shy or introverted. I just think Tom is so focused. And I got to learn firsthand from Tom Monahan. Again, phys ed guy thinking I want to be a coach, but I find myself driving around in my Ford Explorer with the founder of Domino's Pizza in the wee hours of the morning. And that's how I learned about franchising, really through these evening store tours with Mr. Monahan.
John, I would guess, though, that while you didn't even realize it yet or know it yet, the years working for Bo were formulative years for what it would take to become a leader in the world of franchising, where coaching is such an integral part of getting people inspired to share your vision and share your dreams and to deliver operationally the same way as a coach has to get his team focused on doing the same thing on the field, right?
Well said. I couldn't agree more. A legendary speech from Bo Schembechler. And so your listeners should YouTube Bo Schembechler as a team speech. That was how we were ingrained with Coach Schembechler. Everything was about the team. The team, the team, the team. Hearing this talk, no man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. It was always the team, the team, the team. We don't talk about each other. We believe in each other. We encourage each other. And this is how Bo Schembechler was. Well, then I go to Domino's. Tom Monahan was the exact same way. In fact, Tom and Bo were really close. So much a lot of people don't know this. Tom Monahan gave Bo Schembechler his own Domino's pizza store on the campus of Ohio State. They were so similar in so many ways. But the crux of it, in a Domino's pizza store, and this is what I love, there's no hierarchy in a Domino's pizza store because who's more important? Is it the person making the pizza? Are they more important than the person delivering the pizza, right? The person, or is it more important, than the people in the back of the store? There was no hierarchy. Everybody played a critical role in the team. And I guess I didn't realize, but I wanted to go to school to be a coach. When I went to Domino's, that's exactly what I learned to do. I learned from Coach Schembechler. It was reinforced by Tom Monahan. And, one of the things I'll still say is I remember one of my fondest memories at Domino's was I was a manager of the campus store at the University of Michigan. And there's a thing called box topping. What that means is one person folds the box, the other person has the glue, and they put a blot of glue on the box, and then the next person puts the coupon on it. And it's just a little assembly line. And we would do this. Our store was open till 4 a.m., and we would be box topping until the bars closed, typically on a campus store, because then we'd get a big rush at 1 a.m., and we would sit in the part of the store that had no heat, and I would sit there with my team members, and I'll never forget it. One of my team members was a single mom who had 3 jobs. I had another team member who was putting himself through medical school. I had another team member who suffered an alcohol addiction. And I would sit there with these folks, and we would just talk into the wee hours of the morning. And these people they were like heroes to me. Some of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life. And I think that's what drew me to the passion of franchising and being able to work with hardworking people like that. And so that's, Domino's Pizza was so foundational for me. And the other thing I loved about Domino's, again, I didn't learn. I was not a business school major at Michigan. I was a phys ed guy, and no disrespect to my phys ed folks out there. I really thought I wanted just to get into coaching, and a franchise system like a Domino's, you can start as a driver and go on to run a store or run multiple stores, but you learn every facet of the business. And I think that's where I caught the franchising bug way back when, back at Domino's.
So, John, how high up the food chain did you get at Domino's before you moved on to the next milestone?
Yeah, so I was a corporate operations director. I had earned, I think, the trust and respect from probably the people that mattered most. Candidly, I think that could have been a company I would have been happy retiring from because I loved it so much. What changed for me, though, was when Mr. Monahan sold the company to private equity. And this was no disrespect to the buyers of the company just changed. And I don't want to say for the worst. It was just different. And I wasn't working necessarily for Mr. Monahan anymore. So I then had an opportunity to join Krispy Kreme Donuts. Now, Krispy Kreme at the time was one of the sexiest brands, hottest brands in America. And I had this opportunity to come in a leadership role. And it was an amazing time to be with the company. It was just a premium product, premium experience. We took the company public. I was young. I had just gotten married. I was upgraded to first class on every flight I flew just by giving the flight attendants a dozen glazed donuts. That was like the power of this brand. And it was, in between Domino's, iconic brand, Krispy Kreme, again, I was just a phys ed guy, but I just had between what Bo Schembechler did for me and then Tom Monahan, Tom wins IFA's Entrepreneur of the Year in 1992 how did I get so lucky to have Tom come into my life and take me under his wing like he did? I recently wrote a book called Reach, which is about reaching high as an entrepreneur. It's about reaching out to find a mentor. And most importantly, it's about reaching back to be a mentor to others. Tom wrote the foreword to my book 30 years later, right? That's, I'm so proud of my relationship with Mr. Monahan.
We're talking today with John Rotche, founder and CEO of Franworth. More questions to John, but not before we take this quick timeout. So please don't go away. We're coming right back with more Franchise Today.
Franchise Today will be right back, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Franchise Today is brought to you by FRM Solutions, offering the only CRM tool built exclusively for franchising that lets you have it your way. Whether you're a single brand needing professional tools across departments or a portfolio of brands needing franchise-specific CRM across the enterprise. Either way, FRM satisfies the needs of many with the power of one. That's right, one single instance of FRM is all it takes across departments or across brands. So if you've had it with inflexible, one-size-fits-all CRM, end your frustration today. FRM offers robust dashboarding, tailored reporting, and with open APIs, FRM pushes, pulls, and integrates with other databases, providing you with a single source of truth. Don't just take my word for it. Visit them at frmsolutions.com and order up a demo today. So, John, what came next?
So fast forwarding, and this will kind of dovetail into how I got into it, franchising on my own. I'm at Krispy Kreme, and I married my wife, Amy. And in doing so, what came with that, I had extended family members now, and one of my family members, it was a brother-in-law, owned an air duct cleaning business. And he was a sharp guy, ethical guy, and it was just a small business, like one van, and he was doing it to save enough money to put himself into graduate school. Well, he did so, and he got accepted into a school in the Northeast, and then he asked me if I wanted to buy his business. Now, my first reaction probably wasn't very encouraging or flattering to him, and it wasn't representative of him or the business. It was more, I didn't know if I believed in the business. It was an air duct cleaning, and it seemed like when you turned on the 6 o'clock news, a lot of the gotcha type of situations were people who came from that industry. And the reason being is it's a type of industry that you don't know if the duct cleaner was there, candidly, unless they made a mess. Now, that's not a great business. It's not a real good feel-good business. That the only way they know if you were there is if you left dust or footprints in the house. And it seemed to be like a lot of bait and switch. And I guess I didn't understand the business, but equally, I'm not very mechanically gifted. And so when he was asking me to buy it, I didn't know how I would do it. And I also didn't know if I believed in it. So anyhow, he kept asking me. I finally said, how much do you want for the business? And he said, like $17,000. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot of money. Well, it really wasn't, because the business was only doing like $70,000. But as a man in a van, an owner-operator, it was enough for him to accomplish his goals. So, I had another brother-in-law, my wife's brother, who was very handy. So I said, hey, if I buy his business, will you run it? And I'll hire you. And he said yes. So that's why I bought the business. And the business was called Ann Arbor Duct Cleaning. And I'm like, all right, well, one of the things Mr. Monahan from Domino's taught me is the essence of positioning the sacrifice. You can't be all things to all people. Know who you are, what you do it better than anyone on the planet. People don't realize this. They thought Domino's Pizza was a pizza company. It never was. It was a delivery company. Even today, if you look at the logo, they dropped the word pizza, just Domino's. But we're Domino's today, arguably still probably the most tech-savvy delivery company across the globe. So Tom was really focused. He taught that to me, and so much so that I said, okay, if this is all we're going to do, I'm going to be like Mr. Monahan. We're just going to do this, not anything else, and we're going to do it better than everyone. So all we're going to do is ducts. We're not going to do anything other than ducts. I changed the name of the company to Duct. Now, I couldn't get the URL, DUCTS, so I went with DUCTZ. And at the time, it's just like, whatever. It was just a small business, couple vans. I had no idea it would grow to be the nation's largest. And how did that happen? Here's what happened. I'm still a Krispy Kreme, and I'm at a board meeting in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I get a call from my sister-in-law, that says my 6-month-old son was just rushed to the hospital because he couldn't breathe. Well, Krispy Kreme executive Rotche flies back to Ann Arbor, Michigan. I go to the hospital. Come to find out my son has this rare situation happening to him, respiratory issue. And they tell me 2 things to help him. They said you could take his stuffed animals, put them in the freezer during the day, kill the dust mite. At night, take him out, he could sleep with them. He's 6 months old. Second thing they said is, I don't know if you've ever considered having your air ducts cleaned, but you should. But be careful. There's a lot of companies we don't recommend, but there's one that we send all our patients to. It's called Duct. I don't know if you've heard of it, but that's who you should call.
Oh, wow.
And then I said to the doctors, I'm like, well, I own ducts. And they're like, oh, so you already cleaned your ductwork? I'm like, no. And they're like, what do you mean, no? And then I give them the whole story about the brother-in-law wanted to sell it. And, well, funny, I learned a lesson. The doctor said to me, in the middle of this intensive care unit, he's like, gosh, sir, if you own a business, shouldn't you believe in kind of what you do? And it was like this backhanded comment, but that stuck with me forever. So I ended up, we cleaned the ductwork. We come to find out this old West Side Ann Arbor home, the ductwork is contaminated with black mold. So we're blowing like poisonous spores on my infant son. So my son was suffocating, and we just thought he was a colicky child. We cleaned the ductwork. Within weeks, he's 100% healed. He's now a college athlete, and I was like blown away because I'm like, how does this industry that has such a bad reputation, it just saved my son's life. And then I researched it, and then I found the issue was contractors out there were more interested in getting the job than doing the job. So I resigned from Krispy Kreme, restart and kind of reinvent myself. I go get my Michigan contractor's license, mechanical contractor's license. I get in this beat up van with my brother-in-law. I'm the guy schlepping the hoses, vacuuming up after we did the job. But that's how I started. And then I said, you know what? I want to help. How can I help like kids like my son? And then I saw this program through the American Lung Association. And I realized for $500, I could send a child to an overnight, week-long asthma camp. Think of that just like when you were a kid, you went to camp. But asthma camps are staffed with respiratory therapists and medical staff because they're running, they're sweating, campfire smoke and swimming and all of this. So for $500, I could send a child typically from underserved communities to a respiratory camp, an asthma camp. Well, I did that. Now, I was young, my wife and I, we only had a couple of vans. We sent like 10 kids through camp. And then these kids and their parents are sending me letters. I'm just a small guy in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but I'm getting these heartfelt letters from families about what their child was able to experience because of the donation we made. So I started a foundation called Camps for Kids, where I would send more kids to these asthma camps. Well, finally I said, how can I send more kids to camp? Well, I said I could put more vans on the road. Well, how do I do that? We only had so much capital. So then I said, what about, I'll try to franchise. Now, here's what we know. With 3,500 franchise systems in America, 2,600 of them are below 100 locations. On average, 95% of those 2,600 will never get to 100. And I don't believe it's because they're not smart founders or that the brands aren't good or the end market isn't strong enough. I think it is they lack capital, and it's both financial and I'll argue to say even more importantly is intellectual capital. So what did I do? I sought out to find a mentor, and you had mentioned him earlier, David McKinnon. David was the founder of Service Brands International, Molly Maid, Mr. Handyman, 1-800-Dry Clean. I reached out to David and asked him would he be willing to mentor me, and he said yes. Well, I moved my business from my daughter Peyton's bedroom over to Service Brands International. I partner with them. So what did they do? They provided both financial and intellectual capital to me. Even though I was a former exec at Domino's and Krispy Kreme, that doesn't teach you how to be a franchisor. And again, Stan, like what you said, there's no school for it. Yeah, there's some classes that'll pop up here and there, but but how did Rotche all of a sudden, you think about this for a second, injured football guy, I get Bo Schembecker lean into my life, takes me under his wing, mentors me to be a coach. Then I have Tom Monahan, who wins IFA's Entrepreneur of the Year in 1992, takes Rotche under his wing. Then years later, I partner with David McKinnon, and guess what? He won Entrepreneur of the Year 10 years after Tom Monahan. So how does phys ed injured football player Rotche get a guy like Coach Schembeckler, 2 IFA Entrepreneurs of the Year, Tom Monahan and David McKinnon, both intersect into my life. And they both either they're mentoring me or I partner with them. Subsequently, we grow ducks to be the nation's largest. And within 3 years, I then had an opportunity to, after Hurricane Katrina, I was able, a company, Belfor, an amazing company, they represent 90% of the global insurance market, one of the world's largest property restoration companies. They were giving me bigger jobs, up until the point they asked us to come down to New Orleans and clean federal buildings. Again, phys ed guy, donut guy, pizza guy, now I'm a duct cleaning guy. Next thing you know, we're cleaning up after Hurricane Katrina. And I create a national team with semi-tractor trailers, and we're traveling around the world, literally cleaning ductwork. Well, Belfor ultimately felt that they would be able to provide more value to our franchisees because of the amount of work they could give them after fires and floods. So they made us an offer to buy the company. We ultimately accepted it because we knew the positive impact it would have on our franchisees. I stayed with the brand, went to Belfor, created the Belfor Franchise Group, which now has over a dozen different brands. And I will say that they bought on to the Z at the end of ducks because they now have a brand called Plumbers, spelled with a Z. And prior to that brand, while I was at Belfor, I saw another opportunity just as fragmented as the air duct cleaning business. Just as sexy as air duct cleaning was, if I would joke, but I saw in the kitchen exhaust cleaning business. And again, I followed lessons I learned from Tom Monahan. Do one thing, do it better than anything else. And I knew that the industry of cleaning kitchen hoods, there was an opportunity to standardize it. It was very fragmented. So what were we going to do? We were going to clean hoods, nothing else, clean hoods. I was not, even though I had power washers, I was not going to be cleaning the dumpster pads or underneath the drive-through window. I was not cleaning the coils on ice machines. I was just doing hoods. So much so, what did I name the company? Hoods. Right? Because that's what I learned from Tom Monahan. So ducks and hoods, and with the strength and expertise of Belfor and the lessons I learned from my mentors, Hoods Group went on to be the nation's largest kitchen hood cleaning business within 2 years. So at any rate, I know is a long, drawn-out answer to your question, Dan. How did I get into franchising? And you're right, I didn't set out for it. I didn't go to school for it. I didn't read Franchising for Dummies, and that's how I wanted to go start my own franchise business. I was a recipient of incredible mentorship, and I just kind of followed the lessons I learned from these great leaders.
You know what? We're going to park on that, John, but that story was so worthy of listening to without interrupting you that I made an executive decision while listening to you, John, and that is that this is not going to be a single episode of Franchise Today. This is going to be a two-parter because there's just too much here and I'm not going to edit any of it out. So that brings an end to part one of the story of John Rotche's amazing career. But we'll pick up part two of this compelling story next week, right where we left off, talking about his time at the helm of Title Boxing Club and on from there to the present-day portfolio of brands under the banner of Franworth. These include Sugaring L.A., Milkshake Factory, Healthy Source, America's Chiropractor, Mosquito Nix, and Degree Wellness. Until next week and part two of the John Rotche story, I'm Stan Friedman wishing you the best, the very best of all things franchising, and Franchise Today is out.
Franchise Today is a production of FRM Solutions, providing best-in-class CRM tools to empower relationships with prospective and existing franchisees. Find them online at frmsolutions.com. Join Stan every Wednesday at noon Eastern for another episode of Franchise Today. Or, as always, download episodes on demand at blogtalkradio.com